Hello friends. Today we are going to discuss about issuing certificate and ID card for persons with transgender under the Transgender Persons Act of 2019. I'm Dr. Suresh Badadmat, Professor of Psychiatry, Head of Telemedicine Center, Head of Forensic Psychiatry Unit at NIMANS, Bangalore. Before I start my presentation, I would like to have a disclaimer. This presentation is for academic purpose only, not for legal opinion. If you want to have a legal opinion, please do contact an advocate. The Transgender Act of 2019 was passed on 5th of December 2019. Basically, the main objective of this legislation was to provide protection of rights of transgender and their welfare. This has 23 section clauses and 9 chapters. And on 21st August 2020, the National Council of Transgender was also formed, and the rules was notified on 25th September 2020. Let's discuss about this issuing transgender certificate to the persons with transgender. Section 4 clearly talks about a person recognized as transgender shall have a right for self-pursued gender identity. This is a welcome step. That means a person who is being recognized as a transgender can say whatever his gender is. It is not based on the biological gender. That's a significant change in the thinking process of the lawmaker and also the people of India. At the same time, Section 5 talks about how to get this transgender certificate through applying to District Magistrate. Section 6 talks about the certificate of transgender and transgender ID. Section 7 talks about certificate of identity or change of gender. So there are two types. Let's understand that. See, there are two certifications under this legislation. Section 6 and Section 7. Section 6 is basically certification of transgender and transgender ID. This is specifically telling them they are transgender. That is identifying them. The next one is if the transgender wants to be recognized either a male or a female, not as an assigned gender of a biological, then they have to do certain things. Under that, once they have undergone medical intervention, under Section 7, they can apply for District Magistrate for certification of identity for change of gender and gender ID. So these two different types of certification has been recognized under this legislation. Now, the rules have already been notified on 25th September 2020. Let's understand how these rules have been playing a role in issuing the transgender certification and ID card. Certification of transgender. First and the foremost, the transgender has to fill the form number 1, and that form will be submitted to the district magistrate along with an affidavit to be filled, that is form number 2, that is basically a non-judicial stamp under 10 rupees will be submitted along with the form number 1. Form number 1, 2 has to be filled and submitted to the district magistrate. Here, there is no need of medical or physical examination. There is no need of any doctor certificate at this point of time. So, with these two, what we call it as the forms, they can submit along with the identity proof and also the address proof. The address proof is basically the transgender do not have ID many a times. That is photo ID, because most of the times they will be moving out of the family and the family do not give any kind of ID or they do not have any address proof. In such a scenario, this legislation has clearly said in the past 1 year, wherever they are residing, in that jurisdiction, they will apply for the district magistrate. So once, even if they don't have any address, this affidavit is suffix the whole thing. So form number 1, form number 2, or any photo ID along with that, they will submit to the district magistrate. Form number 1. This is how the form number 1 looks. The form number 1 has various important identification mark. Basically, they need to give the biological name first, and also the whole process goes on. It also says assigned gender at birth. So biological gender also has to be mentioned because the certificate issued will be transgender ID. So that is the reason form number is very clear And the same form number 1 will also be used for change of gender certificate also. This is form number 1. And the form number 2. The form number 2 is basically an affidavit which has to be filled and taken a printout and suffixed under the notary. And this has to be clearly mentioned that he is a transgender. That means it is a self-affirmation. So he's telling, I'm a transgender. That will be filed with the district magistrate. And the district magistrate, once he receives the certificate or the forms, he has to issue the certificate within 30 days. So this is how here the under section 6 and rule number 5, they have to follow this. This is how he is going to issue the certificate. That is, you have to see the rule number 5 and 4 under the transgender rules. And here it clearly mentions, look at the point number 5, clearly says this certificate entitles to change their official documents for the transgender ID. So here he can say, I'm not a male gender or a female gender, I'm a transgender. That is, he can change everywhere in his document. That's what is form number 3. At the same time, form number 5, the transgender ID card. The ID card is basically has a ID card which has a front and back, which will clearly has a photograph and his address proof and his name, father's name, mother's name, and also the transgender will be mentioned here. And the issue of card and also the reference number for each ID card will be mentioned, and also for the certificate. This ID card will be, this ID number will be used whenever the document name, gender, and photographs are changed as per the law. That is basically Annexure 1. Annexure 1 of the rules clearly says, along with this transgender certificate and ID card, he can apply the original documents to change their photograph, their name, their gender. And once they submit within 15 days, the people who are responsible for changing those documents, name, photograph, have to do it. Those are birth certificate, tribe certificate or caste certificate, an educational certificate from the school, board, college, university, or any academic institution, election photo ID card, Aadhaar card, PAN card, driving license, BPL card, post office, passport, Kisan passbook, marriage certificate, electricity, water gas connection, property papers, vehicle registration, service book, employment papers, ID card, and policy papers. So these are the various 18 documents the government has given permission to change their name, gender, and photograph. So to conclude, my dear friends, this legislation is a first step to mainstream transgender. The transgender rights have been ignored, discriminated for long. This government has made a landmark legislation. But however, the misuse of transgender ID certificate and the punishment has not been fixed. So in the next amendment, I would like to see if anybody misuses this transgender certificate, they need to be punished, because this legislation is very specifically for transgender. Thank you very much for your valuable time. Stay safe.